On the 16th of May, 1992, a unique visitor arrives at 12th century Ford Abbey on its return to England for the first time in 175 years. The most valuable piano in the world was coming home. The piano was made in 1817 by Thomas Broadwood. After the Napoleonic Wars, wealthy Britain started to travel to Europe again. Whilst in Vienna, Thomas Broadwood went to meet the greatest living composer, Beethoven.
They struck up quite a friendship, and he went back to London, decided to make a gift of an instrument to Beethoven. And he organized a committee of 5 pianists and composers who went around the factory and selected the best instrument they could find. Because after all, with instrument making, it's not just a question of doing everything right. You can make the instrument the same way. All the instruments can be a stock instrument, but one is better than the other. And that's just a question of magic and luck, finally. And it's clear this was one of those very special instruments.
The piano was sent by sea to Trieste, where it was taken by cart to Vienna. Even before he got the piano, Beethoven wrote, "My very dear friend Broadwood, I have never felt a greater pleasure than your honor's intimation of the arrival of this piano, with which you are honoring me as a present. I shall look upon it as an altar, upon which I shall place the most beautiful offerings of my spirit to the divine Apollo. As soon as I receive your excellent instrument, I shall immediately send you the fruits of my inspiration. I hope they will be worthy of your instrument." On its arrival in Vienna, a music journalist reported, "The instrument is perhaps the most perfect grand piano ever constructed. No other in our country can be compared to it." For the last 150 years, it has been in Budapest, in the Hungarian National Museum.
After the death of Beethoven, the piano was sold with all the other furniture of his property. The piano came to an antique dealer called Spina. Spina couldn't sell this piano because it was almost an old one with a quite an old-fashioned one, we can say. But he knew Franz Liszt, and he gave it to him in 1846. Liszt took the piano to Weimar, to his house, and put it to his library. Liszt never used this piano. It was only a relic for him, a very, very valuable relic of Beethoven. Franz Liszt, in his will, gave the piano to the Hungarian National Museum, which arrived in 1874. And it was immediately exhibited in one of these rooms. Even Beethoven understood that all the repairs made in Vienna made his English piano closer to a Viennese than an English one. And it was the same for the later repairs in the 19th and in the 20th century. And now, current research has made us possible to have more understanding of the concept of an English piano. And now we do have also the right people who can do this work, very important work. It took about a year to find the right person, David Winston.
Well, I've been asked to come here and restore this piano that was sent to Beethoven in 1818. And the basic brief is that the restoration really must be essentially part of the conservation of the instrument. So it has to be done extremely carefully. We have to really keep in mind that Beethoven is still our client. The main problems are musical problems. We know, in fact, that shortly after Beethoven had this instrument, it wasn't in playing condition. He was pretty rough on it. So it probably hasn't really played properly since about 1820. It has had quite a lot of work done on it over the years. A lot of work was done by the major makers in Vienna at the time, which has really taken it away from what it was originally. The right materials weren't available, the information wasn't available. Now that we've had so much more interest in these instruments, we've just got a lot more knowledge, and so I'm attempting to use that knowledge now and bring it back to how it would have been in 1818. And it was the most advanced piano in England at the time. What's so interesting about it is that it really, and piano making at that time was no longer in its infancy. They'd changed so dramatically, and especially around this period, 1815, 1820, pianos seemed to be changing daily. And when this arrived in Vienna, there was really just about nothing like it in Vienna, and the Viennese didn't know exactly what to make of it, and the Viennese piano makers didn't know exactly how to deal with it. But we know that Beethoven was extremely proud of it and guarded it very, very carefully. These are the hammers to Beethoven's piano, and they tell us quite a lot of the history of this particular instrument, some of the repairs. For example, we see that the leather has been pulled tighter on the hammers, and that was an effort to brighten the tone, because the Viennese weren't really familiar with the very warm, round tone of an English piano. So you can see where they loosened one end of the leather hammer covering, pulled it tighter, and then re-glued it. So that's quite interesting. Now making the strings, making the string windings in preparation for restringing the instruments. This is a very important detail, actually, how the winding is made, because this wire is a very special type of wire. It's very different than a modern piano wire. It's a soft iron, and it's not capable of taking anything like the tension of modern piano wire, and the resultant sound is very different. In fact, the wire will be very close to the actual breaking point, and that single fact does affect the sound very dramatically. One important thing about restoration is that you are forever looking for clues, and it's important not to destroy any clues in the process of the restoration, and that it means that absolutely nothing gets thrown out, even to the point of saving all these tiny bits and pieces of wood which were found inside the instrument, and they're evidence of a previous restoration. They tell us a bit more about the history, and in 20 years' time, they might help tell somebody else a bit more about the history that I wasn't able to figure out. So it's worth saving. It's all documented and put away in a safe place. Well, what I like about working on these instruments so much is that they start to tell you a story as you work on them. You uncover little messages or signatures, all kinds of things, and you have to be very careful as you're working on the instrument that you don't take these things away. For example, here we have Mr. Murray's signature here and here, and I believe Mr. Murray was most likely the foreman of the action department at Broadwood's at that time. His signature is usually on these actions. One's tempted to, I'm tempted to sign it somewhere, but of course I won't.